So today we have Connie Bowen, who is the Director of Innovation and Investment at AgLaunch. She's passionate about distributing knowledge and inspiring inclusive, impactful innovation in our global food and egg system. She has been continuously tracking women in agriculture, more specifically women in egg tech. So Connie, without much ado, I would like to hand over floor to you and look forward to a very insightful session from you. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. And yeah, thanks all for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. As Deepak said, I'm very passionate about increasing access for all elements of agri-food systems. Today, I figured I'll chat a little bit about something. I've listened and tuned into some of the sessions earlier today, and they've been really interesting, that which I've been able to listen to. And I figured I'd kind of go through a little bit something that's very important to me, and I think very important to everyone involved in ag tech, hopefully, and that is farm-centric kind of innovation. But then we can kind of go into a little bit of discussion. Deepak, I'll keep it relatively concise. But let me just share this presentation here that I've got. I'll start at the beginning instead of the end. But yeah, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about farm-centric innovation, and I appreciate that this event is a little bit more around sharing the really cool stuff that people who happen to be women are working on, as opposed to what's it like to be a woman in ag. I think that's much more interesting. That said, I'm going to give a little bit more personal kind of intro than I normally do, because I think that I want to kind of tell the evolution of kind of my thinking, because I grew up in kind of the New York City suburbs in New Jersey. Definitely never imagined that I would end up living in the Midwest or even living on farms in Oregon for a period of time. But that kind of pathway has given me an opportunity to see the importance and actually maybe gap in terms of farmer innovation and farmer involvement in innovation. So I figured I'd start with some fun, kind of quick about me. I like I said, grew up in kind of the burbs, got into startup land actually through developing kind of aeroponic food computer systems, was very early, engaged very early in the kind of beginning, I guess, of the ag tech boom with the yield lab in St. Louis very early on. And actually was also dabbling in kind of more traditional tech venture capital investment, early kind of seed stage, but have always really had this deep passion for food and sustainability. And then I always joke that kind of the marriage of a love of food and engineering, I'm an engineer as well, leads you to ag tech, I hope. But what I wanted to really kind of convey here is, you know, you can see me here like bucking hemp on a farm. I planted a hazelnut orchard, and then I'm on the other end of the shovel fixing an irrigation pipe. And I wanted to include that picture because, and that's a small part. That's when the whole started as a small situation. But I was fixing an irrigation pipe one day, and long story involving a lack of a pump. But it was a pretty rough situation. The irrigation guys couldn't come out. We were in the middle of blueberry harvest. It was dry. The blueberries needed water. We had to fix those pipes that week ourselves. And as I was doing that, I was thinking about all of the kind of companies I've heard pitch over the years about irrigation technologies. And you know, the fact that we had top of the line equipment, but we were out there on our own because we're in a rural area. And you know, it really helped me. I kind of had as I was bailing out a hole with buckets of water, I was thinking, okay, it's probably going to take longer to bring some of these irrigation tech products to market than you would think. And I deeply understand why. And I don't consider myself to be a farmer. I don't have that much on-farm experience, but I have just enough of a taste to know that it's hard, it's different everywhere, and it really matters that farmers are a part of ag tech innovation. And so that's kind of partially what led me to AgLaunch, where I serve as the director of innovation and investment. So I work on our internal innovation projects, and I work on our kind of with some of our external vetting companies. We do a number of different things that I'll get in the weeds on a bit more later here. But I'm really focused on trying to understand better how we can more effectively integrate traditional agriculture with high-tech innovation, and do so in a way that works for everyone and moves everything forward positively. So I wanted to set a quick kind of set the stage quickly. I'm sure that others have talked about this too. Ag tech investment continues to climb. It's exciting. There's a lot of food tech investment. I'm seeing a lot more kind of what I call coastal investors. Again, forgive me. I live in St. Louis, Missouri now. I work primarily in kind of the Delta region with AgLaunch, but my background is on the coast, and so there's this kind of interesting concentration of wealth and investment that's starting to be really excited by the clean tech opportunity that ag tech creates, and that's awesome. We definitely need more investment in the space, but it's important that the folks making that investment understand what they're investing in, so that expectations can be aligned. And so, yeah, as you can see here, it's climbing everywhere. I want to kind of break it down a little bit by category too, though, to understand a little bit better. And these figures are all from Ag Funders investment reports. But I just wanted to take a look here and kind of point out that a majority of investment isn't going to what I call farm gate technology. So farm robotics, farm machinery. A lot is going to midstream technologies. You can see that on the leftmost column. That's over here. Though it tends to be a little bit further, a little closer to the consumer side and a little further from the farmer side. And I would argue that that is a real problem, because if you cannot connect the consumer end of the food system to the production end of the food system in a way that incentivizes everyone along the supply chain to, let's assume we all want to do better in some way, right? You've got a problem. And I think we actually do have that problem today. So I think, again, these reports, all of Ag Funders reports, are always worth looking into. But my broader point here is there is a lot of investment flowing to ag tech, and that's great. There's also not very much on-farm adoption, and that's not so great. Because some, again, it has to kind of start, arguably it has to start at the input stage, but behavior change has to happen on the farm. And as you can see from this is what I think, study done in May 2020 about the 2019 season by Farm Journal's Trust in Food. And I share it with everyone all the time, because farmers just aren't, I won't read slides to you, but farmers are not using enough software. From this has improved probably a bit, but in 2019, 62% of farmers weren't using farm level data software, and 46% were storing their data primarily on paper records. And then folks weren't happy with what they have. There's not necessarily, we're not necessarily all on the same page. We talk a lot in agri-food systems about transparency being this objective end goal, and farmers don't necessarily share that, and that's kind of setting us up for a problem. And a lot of that, it ties back to profit, right? When you look at food dollar distribution, farmers do not get, and I should have clarified this from the beginning. I'm speaking largely from a US context, but farmers do not get very much of the food dollar. And therefore, there sometimes is a lack of incentive to change behavior, which makes sense, actually. And it leads to trust issues between kind of all parties. So again, this brings me to AgLaunch. I think we have part of the solution for this. I think there can be a lot of other similar, I would love to see similar kind of groups emerge. But we're a farmer network at our core. We're, like I mentioned before, based in Memphis, Tennessee. We've got partners in Iowa, we've got partners in Oregon. But we are connecting farmers with early stage technology companies. We are helping farmers to develop business plans to better value add that which they're already producing and help them gain access to new, and work with them so that we can kind of create new market opportunities. We develop innovation internally. So we've got a very interesting kind of data cooperative model called the Data Commons. We develop other kind of technologies and kind of consortium models. So we're working on creating a specialty produce smart contract system to link small and mid-sized US farmers to opportunities to market their specialty produce, their non-commodity specialty produce to institutional purchasers. And we're working on that in a consortium model along with the SEAM, Wallace Center, Foundation for Food and Ag Research, and others. And then we also work a lot with startups, external startups. So what we kind of end up doing, and we do that, and we think it's a win-win kind of for everyone involved. We've worked with a number of companies over the years at different stages, and we run a series of programs from boot camps to accelerators. We call it kind of our 365 program is probably our flagship program. And they're different than every other accelerator. We don't have a fund, we're a nonprofit entity. We do have a network of farmers, many of whom invest cash and time and energy into ag tech startups. We run a series of programming, and we, most importantly, I think, work with startup companies to design on-farm trials that can then be done over the course of multiple seasons. We generally set the bar at about 3 seasons, so we're not working with a contra season, so that's typically a 3-year relationship minimum. And we pair companies with farmers so that these farmers can really, highly progressive farmers, so that these farmers can serve as mentors to the company and really help them, again, to de-risk their innovation, to make sure they're building something that farmer wants to pay for, and to help figure out all the bugs. The way I look at it, farmers ought to be on kind of every startup's advisory board because they're the end user and they add value. I've outlined a couple examples here. There's some well-known companies, Rantizo, which is now a buyer-backed company, does aerial applications for drone spray. Stony Creek Colors is really cool. They're developing a full supply chain for natural indigo for things like denim and natural indigo dyes. And like I mentioned, we do some value-added stuff as well. I threw a Growing Acres farm in here. Alex out in Savannah, Tennessee, is working on developing a bunch of different sorghum varieties and figuring out kind of the how much vertical integration or cooperation can he do with his surrounding, his neighbor partners, essentially, to, again, capture the full value of new varieties of crops in the region. So just to quickly kind of outline how actually this kind of works and what the pathway looks like. Again, we have kind of a demonstration, what we call a digital acre, that is basically, it's actually 2.5 acres, but it's 2.5 acres with all sorts of fun tech stuff. It's the way we like to describe it. We track a ton of information so that all of our beans and sorghum and corn can be tracked using the most progressive kind of sustainability protocols, and we can test that out there. We just put all sorts of different sensors in there. We play with different robots in those, and we play with different applications, and that's where it really starts. That's very small scale research. Then as startups kind of scale up, and of course, these processes have to look different for different types of companies, right? We know, for instance, we're running a robotics challenge next season, so 2022 season. We know that the companies who are developing large, expensive robotic and ag equipment are going to be later stage companies with a very kind of clear idea of how this thing needs to work and what a trial needs to look like. That trial is going to look very different than, say, a software application that monitors tasks and workers and kind of helps to, is more of a workforce management system, right? Those are very different trials, and we have the flexibility in our kind of structure to insert technologies and companies along kind of the innovation spectrum in different components of our system. We do plots, we work with Extension with a number of different universities in the area. It's particularly important to us. One key element of kind of the AgLaunch model, as well as ensuring that the future of agriculture is diverse in all senses, and that includes crops, but also the people who own and farm and manage and profit from the industry, and that's everywhere from ag tech to on farm. We do have partnerships with various historically Black colleges and universities as well. And then as we kind of continue to commercialize, we've got this network of progressive growers who are willing to work really closely with these different companies. We work to make sure that farmers are getting an appropriate upside for their investment of their land, resources, time. And we have partnerships in place in the state of Tennessee and are working on expanding this such that ag tech trials can happen and farmers can actually be reimbursed for the hard costs of those trials. So you can get paid trials. So that enables startup companies to get paid trials very early on. And we kind of do this all in the context of looking at, I would say, kind of the classic in vogue ag tech innovation things. We look a lot at soil health, new financial tools. Financial and profitability is always a really core thing to our Farmer Network members. And then we're also kind of trying to figure out value chains as how do we make traceability work for everyone, right? And so, like I said, I'll keep it pretty brief. This is really my last kind of point here, but if we don't include farms and farmers in the ag tech innovation conversation, it's like blindly, startups are kind of blindly jumping after a market that they don't understand. And that can be really dangerous for them and their investors. And it doesn't actually help to solve the problems we want to solve. And so the solution is easy, or relatively easy. It's not easy, but it's intuitive, I suppose. We've got to have farm-centered innovation. It enables farms to get tools that work. It enables farms to be more profitable and therefore be able to reinvest those profits into more technology. And it also enables startups to get customers, which is pretty essential for any company. It enables entrepreneurs to get a more diverse set of investors and advisors. And it enables investors to make more intelligent decisions when they ensure that farms and farmers are part of the decision-making process. So with that, I'll I guess chat a little bit with Deepak if you want, but I can stop share here too.
Yeah, sure. Connie, awesome. I wish I could have seen something like that 6 years back when I started my tech journey. So to just give the reference, when I started my tech company, that was my second company. Before that, I was into social media data analytics, sitting in your office, crunching data, creating big data analytics solutions, and life was okay. When I got into agriculture, the first lesson we got was that when we created this application for farmers in Indonesia, and I thought this is Tinder for farmers. It was so glamorous, right swipe, left swipe, long press. I thought I'll get a UX award. The company will be winning so many awards for the beautiful design. And 3 months down the line, we get the feedback that it's not working. It's rejected by the farmers. And then the arduous journey of understanding farmers started. And today, I visited 34 different countries, worked with the farmers, understood their challenge. If I could have all those things given me in platter with AgLaunch, I would have saved a lot of time, effort, and money for sure. So now my first question to you is that what was that point of inflection for you to decide that you want to do something like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think, like I said, I've always been drawn to ag tech, I think from a I'm a huge nerd. I love food and I care about sustainability. But as I was kind of watching ag tech investment climb, I was also kind of watching. I was involved in kind of early stage investment on kind of a global basis with the Yield Lab at the time, and also in working with this Great Barber venture capital group, but working with more traditional tech investors who were starting to dip their toes in ag tech, which is a huge opportunity. But then if you look back at kind of like the history of clean tech investment and the bubble, I suppose, that kind of burst there back in the 90s, there are kind of a lot of parallels. And I think that I felt like, wow, I feel like there might be a problem here. It seems intuitive to me that there's some mismatch, and I guess I got that just from listening and asking questions of folks who are more directly involved in ag industry, and I thought, I guess I better learn more about this, and so I ended up working in kind of farmland investment for a little bit, and actually trying to spin out a company out of that myself, and it's as soon as you get one taste of, so to set a little more context, I was living and working out in Oregon. We had with a farmland investment fund that was basically buying up inexpensive land and using regenerative practices to flip it and increase its value. And we had 6 properties out in Oregon. We were growing hazelnuts, blueberries, and hemp out there. Some stuff organic, some stuff conventional. And then this was in 2019. So the hemp side of things was very interesting at that point in time. We were one of the earlier kind of CBD movers, but we were trying to figure out how do you pull more of the profitability onto our farms, because we're used to marketing everything commodity. And there's a million and one factors, but basically farming is really hard. I was pulling very long hours. We had I spent a little bit more time probably on farm than was intentional, just kind of helping out the team. And it's one of those things where it's easier to think about it from a high level and not really understand it. But then once you start to understand a single system, you're like, wow, this is so complex. Every single farm in this little county is different. And then we tend in kind of technology, or even, at our desk jobs, to lump all of agriculture as agriculture, or maybe we separate it into like row crop and precision and livestock. But that really covers up a lot of the nuances and differences between operations. And so to me, the hard part of ag tech is the ag side. So I guess, I don't know if it was a single moment, but yeah, that's kind of how it went.
Cool. So there is a lot of similarity in the thought process. In fact, now I'm a full-time farmer. So we are working on various projects in which actually we do agriculture. So from creating and selling technology, I'm the now user of technology. So we are cultivating crops like ginger, garlic, turmeric, moringa. So typically the foods which are not already controlled by the big corporations, right? So there is some play for us. So that's the idea, with focus of trying to grow food closest to the consumer, right? More native the food, better it is for the whole of ecosystem. So that brings me to my next question, which is also relevant to the topic of this web summit. As a woman, how challenging it was to, first of all, to break that glass ceiling of being in investment in agriculture, then getting into agriculture, and then getting onto the farms. 3 different stages. And I believe at each stage, I think there would have been a big hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I consider myself pretty fortunate to truly, I have done some blind stumbling into things. I definitely, again, I grew up in a neighborhood that everyone kind of works in Manhattan's financial district, and that's truthfully been helpful to me. I stumbled into venture capital through a kind of entrepreneurial fellowship program that I didn't know a ton about, but I was in. So I guess so I definitely had when I was studying engineering, I suppose in college, I was doing a bunch of kind of aeroponic systems, and folks may or may not be familiar with some of the early kind of food computer research, really centered at like MIT's Open Ag Institute, and AeroFarms was just kind of coming up then and was in my neck of the woods. And I will say that I definitely had trouble getting access to even kind of interviews and job opportunities in that space then. And while my partner, who I worked on all kind of the engineering projects with, who was a man, always got those interviews. But again, it worked out well for me. I stumbled into venture capital instead. And I definitely am usually the only woman in the room, which can be frustrating. I think to me, I feel less personally challenged than as the person who has a seat at the table. I feel it's my responsibility to create opportunities for myself, but for others. And I definitely observe time and time again women entrepreneurs being judged differently by investors, whether or not that's intentional. Oftentimes it isn't. And it's a huge problem, and I am gonna probably be working on it my whole career, and then the next generation after me, unfortunately, is probably going to be working on it too. So yeah, I would, and then on farm too, I end up in like pickup trucks a lot with guys, even thinking about some of the like HR challenges on farm, definitely from like relatively minor stuff like farm guys. I typically have been not in the management team of the farm. I've been kind of more on the fund management of that team, but definitely deal with things like male workers pinching female workers and harassing them and knocking them on trucks. And you have to deal with all of that. And it only happens to the women. It doesn't happen to the men. It's a real problem. But making the most of it, working on it. But
I like that attitude, taking on the chin and ready for the next punch.
Yeah.
So that would summarize your career.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too, if it's okay, because you're talking about some of the interesting stuff you're producing, like moringa and whatnot. That to me is one of the most interesting kind of opportunities in agriculture right now. Like we all, again, when going back to the disconnect between on farm and supply chain, there does feel like there's this vocal demand for a greater diversity of higher nutrition, flavor, whatever, better marketed, I would argue, produce, right? But there's this, it's so difficult to develop a new supply chain. And, I was in hemp early. I have some understanding of we didn't really think about how to deal with this processing element. But there's that marketing challenge is huge. And that's something we're working on in the US context, but it's really interesting and kind of I actually think in the Indian context, there's almost an opportunity to do some leapfrogging. And again, this is where I know a lot about the US farm context and not enough, and just enough to oversimplify in different global contexts, which makes it easier to think about, right? But what we're working on is kind of a smart contract system to link up these special attributes, because in theory, you can get value and people want value for maybe a woman farm, this was produced by a woman-owned business. That might actually yield a premium. But right now, there's no way to really connect that farm seller and buyer. And usually the intermediaries kind of in between are the ones who are aggregating and marketing it. And so with the very niche specialty crops, though, there's a really interesting opportunity right now that I think we'll see a lot of kind of different tech moves in. And we're trying to do kind of the, what I would say is like the quasi-private public version of this tool that is accessible to, not profit driven, actually is accessible to small and mid-sized under-resourced farmers as well as larger farmers. But I think that's like the most interesting space right now. had to
No,
chime in.
I fully agree with you. So because the challenge is that food habits are changing, the demands are changing. We are recalibrating a lot of things, and COVID has made it more urgent for all of us to identify a better source, more sustainable sources. And I believe that people would be ready to give premium for something which is like, healthier for them. And I strongly believe that actually, like, if somebody can sell you cornflakes for decades, right? And then with the smart marketing, you can at least sell some superfoods, which definitely have right nutrients.
Right. And then the challenge, though, becomes like you have to somehow there has to be someone tracking that data early enough and like carrying it through the chain. And that's where you have to have, I think that farmers also need to work. We on the tech side need to work with farmers, but farmers need to work with other farmers as well to make it so that they can actually invest in some of this stuff in a way that they control it. Because I think that is pretty necessary. I also wanted to make sure I saw Karen's question. If it's okay, I'm going to mention quickly our kind of upcoming challenges. But we run our 365 row crop challenge every summer. We'll open up applications for that at the end of this summer. That's for early stage ag tech startups who want to work with row crop producers in our network. Though not exclusively. We sometimes have a couple specialty crops. You can check out our website and portfolio to see what that looks like. And then we'll be doing a later stage challenge next summer focused on farm equipment and robotics specifically. And that will be a non-equity based challenge. We are working on kind of figuring out, one of the challenges here in ag tech too is there's a need for investment in companies that won't necessarily become unicorn status companies. And so how do we figure that out? Well, farmers are going to figure it out because they actually need the thing. And so we're working on some kind of different instruments that there will be more to come on that, but that won't be till next season.
No, I fully agree with you that, like, we have to support even those companies which we are pretty strongly believe are not going to become unicorn, because end of the day, few unicorns is not going to what is going to helps the agriculture sector. We need hundreds of companies or maybe thousands of companies which, like, are scalable, right? And scalable to the limit of, like, if even they are serving, say, 100,000 farmers or 200,000 farmers and profitable, I believe that's a good enough scenario to be in. To end the session, I would like your views on or your message for all those young ladies out there who want to get into agriculture, how you would motivate them, and all those men listening to us, what they should do to motivate these women.
I would say women are probably motivated enough. I think maybe just make sure that I think women should feel free to speak up. And I guess then ally kind of guys should feel encouraged to make space and maybe when in a group setting, make sure that amplify women's messages and as instead of kind of talking over them. And again, just create opportunities for others. And yeah, I wouldn't. And then on I guess for young women, don't hesitate to reach out. Ag tech is a small world, and we're all pretty friendly. I have a pretty open door policy, and most folks I know do as well. So don't send a cold email, LinkedIn message, tweet, Twitter DM, whatever. People will probably help you out.
And yes, Connie is having an open door policy, which her LinkedIn also very clearly mentioned. So please reach out, all you awesome ladies who want to build a career in ag tech or even pure farming. She's the lady to reach out to because she is being on all sides of the tables. Thanks a lot, Connie. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.